Hi, welcome everyone. Nope, that's the wrong set of slides. Wrong slide. Yeah, that's another talk. I have 4 talks. I can use my computer.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
这什么情况？你不能说，我就感觉第一个不对。
I can give that talk again if you want.
Yes, so I confused. Why is stopped in?
And do we need?
有点小插曲，大家耐心等待一下。If you want to switch the slide, you should use the keyboard.
Oh yeah, true. Yep. Sorry, just give us a second while we switch computers.
Okay.
Nope.
Oh, no. Do you have made a mistake?
Oh, no, it's just got the wrong title.
Oh, okay.
So we are talking about the Apache Incubator here. So just to start off, a little bit about who I am. I think most people may know of me here. Who hands up here who knows who I am? A couple. Okay, good. So I've been involved with the ASF for more than a decade, almost 15 years now. I'm currently an ASF board member, but my main role at the ASF is that of the VP of the Apache Incubator. And in that role, I help out mentoring projects and also help out in the incubator PMC itself. I've been involved with more than 20 projects now over that time that I've been at the ASF. And many of those projects have gone on to graduate, and a couple of them have even retired. So that's good. I've seen projects go from very, very start of incubation all the way through incubation to become a top-level project, survive many years, and then when they've, no longer have a useful use and don't have a large community behind them, gracefully retire. And that's a good thing. One of the other things that I do on the incubator is review releases. Who here is in an incubating project? Yeah, okay, we got a few. Who here have I voted on their release? Oh, that's a surprise. I generally vote on a lot of releases. I counted them up the other day, and it's actually more than 1,000 releases. And if there's something wrong with your release, I'll probably find it. So if you need advice on releases, come talk to me. I'm happy to review your release, and I'm happy to help. So the Apache Incubator is the main entry point for where projects come to the ASF and they learn to become ASF projects. So what does that mean? Well, it means that the projects need to align with ASF values, which we often put together and collectively call the Apache Way. And the Apache Way, I'll go in a little detail actually in a slide, next slide. So, and that's a process, and that takes a little time. It can be as short as 6 months, but it usually takes about 1.5 years. Some projects take longer to graduate in the incubator. And that can be for a number of reasons. There can be complexity around their releases. It may take time. They may have a complex code base, and it may take time to move everything over to the ASF. And then there may be other issues that stop them from graduating in that short time frame. But, we still have projects that graduate within 2 and 3 years that end up becoming quite popular and viable projects. Some projects hang around a little too long in the incubator and sometimes need a little bit of encouragement to graduate. But generally it happens. About 3/4 of the projects that enter the incubator graduate. The other quarter generally retire, mostly due to lack of community interest, sometimes due because of vendor involvement in a project, A vendor may decide that this is no longer what they want to do and pull all the developers off the project, and then there's not much left as far as community development going on. Unfortunately, in that case, the project almost always has to retire. So the Apache Way, this is what projects need to adhere to, and it is a loose set of values that mean different things to different projects. So there's quite a number of ways of interpreting this, and if you ask any one person, what is the Apache Way, you may get a different answer. Now that's maybe confusing for people who are starting out, but it does mean that it's flexible, and as long as you adhere to these values, it means that you can graduate as a project. So first off, it needs to be for the public good. The ASF is a charity, and there are tax implications in that, just the way the ASF is legally set up as a corporation in Delaware. But you don't really have to worry about that. But just keep in mind that what you are doing is actually for the entire community and the public. It's not for a single vendor. It's not to make money. It's not for a whole lot of other reasons. It's that you're helping people, and that's it. All ASF releases are released under the Apache license, and the Apache license is a practical, business-friendly, permissive license. It puts very, very few restrictions on what you can do with ASF software. And it means that you can, for example, include it in commercial software and then sell that software. And as long as you just say, oh, by the way, we've included this bit of ASF software in here, that's fine. We like people to contribute back to our projects, but that is not a requirement. There's no need for, if you use an ASF project, you don't have to contribute code. The reasoning behind this is that we've made it permissive that anyone can use it, that there will be a small subset of those who will contribute back, and that's good. So there'll be a very large group who uses it, and a small set of those who say, yeah, we really like this and we want to make it better because it's, part of what we do and what we're developing, so we'll contribute back. One of the other principles is that the community comes first and that the community makes decisions on the direction of the project. So there is no corporate roadmap, there is no sudden changes because of different corporate involvement. There shouldn't be anyway. So everything needs to be discussed openly and transparently on a mailing list, and people will go backwards and forth and try to work out the best way to move forward. And hopefully they can come to some agreement on that. Sometimes agreement is not possible, and that there are ways of solving that as well. But in general, eventually people will decide on a way forward, or what the most important features are, or how we're going to develop this important feature, and progress will continue along those lines. The other thing that we have is that we recognise merit. And the way I like to put that is the more you do on a project, the more responsibility you get. So if you show up to a project and you get really enthusiastic about it, and you start contributing lots of code and PRs and patches, hopefully you'll be made a committer. And the way I see that is that you now have more responsibility. Because you're a committer, you now have you're more invested in the community, and you should take that, seriously. And again, eventually you'll be made a PMC member, and that means you have a wider responsibility than just the code itself. You actually have responsibility for the entire community. And it's your job to make sure that that community grows in a healthy and sustainable way. The other main principle, and I've already touched on this because some of them overlap a little bit, is that all work needs to happen in the public, everything is open, and everything is transparent. And this means more people can get involved in your project. If you have everything open and transparent and documented, say on a mailing list, then anyone can look at that, what's happened in the entire history of that project, and see why certain decisions were being made, seeing what sort of development has gone on and what hasn't gone on, and it makes them much easier to become involved in the project. They don't have to keep asking silly questions of people saying, you know, why do we do things this way? Because it's already there and documented. They just have to try and find it. Finding it's sometimes hard, but it's there if you look hard enough. So when projects enter incubation, they'll go through a process. And there are several goals of what that is. The first one, the ultimate goal is to graduate as a top-level project. That's what you want to do. There you go. So, but before you do that, in order to graduate, you have to learn and follow the Apache way. And I've just gone through a description of that. So you need to be open and transparent. You need to recognize merit. You need to be creating software for the public good. And that also means you need to be making releases. If you don't make releases, then you're not actually creating anything really. So that's important as well. You also need to grow your community. If you don't grow your community, then there's not going to be anyone who can write code or review patches or write documentations or write tests. Come in. There's a few seats up the front here. Just come and grab them. That's all right. Hi. Grab a seat. All right, you haven't missed much. I've just been going through what the Apache way is and what the goals of incubation are. So one of the ideas is that you want to grow your community, you want to add more committers, and some of this is just because people will come and go from a project. Like someone may start off with a project, it may be important to their day job, so their work will allow them to work on it. And then in 2 or 3 years' time, maybe it's no longer important. Maybe they're using a different technology stack. Maybe their life has changed. Maybe they've got married or have children and no longer have the spare time that they did have to be able to contribute to the project. So you've always got to think that, you know, what is going to happen when I stop working on this project? Is there going to be someone that can replace me? So you want to try and grow your community, add more committers, and the more committers you add, you know, the more work they can do, and the less that you have to do, hopefully. So, you know, that's a good thing. One of the other goals of incubation is to understand ASF trademarks and branding. Has anyone noticed that downstairs some of the marketing signs have been changed? A couple of them have pasted over bits, and in fact, a couple of them have been removed. That was because they didn't comply with ASF branding rules. That's because they were implying ownership of a project, or they were implying, well, we're not saying that they were an incubating project, for example, in one case, which you need to do. So one of the other goals of incubation is to understand what's permissible with branding and trademarks, and in particular, how third parties use that. And that's a really important thing, and that's one of the things that some podlings get caught up on, and in a couple of cases, that's actually delayed graduation. The other thing is, as I've mentioned, you need to make releases, but more importantly, you need to make releases that are ASF compliant. So they need to comply with ASF distribution and release policy. And I'll go into a little detail about that in a minute. And then finally, you know, once you've all done all that, you are now then working towards becoming a top-level project at the ASF. So I'm going to go through the journey of a typical project and just say what the steps are that need to happen. Is there anyone here who is thinking of donating a project to the ASF? No? Okay, that's good. If you are, come speak to me. I'm here for the rest of the conference. I'm here all afternoon, so you've still got some time to come and have a chat, and I'll explain the steps through for you. So we have a proposal template. It's very simple to fill out. It asks a series of questions. None of them are complicated. We also have every single proposal ever and that's about 300 proposals that have been submitted through the incubator. So you can look at any other proposal for ideas or to see how they did that. So you can, I won't say copy and paste, but you can get some good ideas of what makes a good proposal and what makes, maybe not so good proposal. And once you've put a proposal together, you can post that on the incubator list, and then there will be a discussion about it. Generally, by the point that you've put a proposal together, you've got a good idea whether you're a good fit for the ASF or not. So about 25% of proposals we get, maybe 30% of proposals we get, won't progress any further. But that's because when they're filling out this form, they realised, oh, no, maybe the ASF isn't the best place for our project. Maybe we should go somewhere else, or maybe we should create our own foundation or whatever. So there would then be a discussion about the proposal. Generally, it will need to be, modified a little bit, improved, and then the incubator will vote on it and get accepted. Most proposals, once they get to this stage, do get accepted. So then you join the incubator, and the first thing you need to do is think about transferring all of the code to the ASF. And that's done via a software grant. That's the usual way anyway. There's a few other ways that it can happen. And that may take a little bit of time depending on, the history of the project and the legal implications of that. But you can transfer the code to the ASF, so it is now in the ASF GitHub repositories. And while that's happening, you'll set up mailing lists, you'll set up version control, you'll set up a website, hopefully. So you've got the start of a project there with ASF branding and everything that is needed that is living on ASF infrastructure. Part of that process is forming what's called a PPMC, which is a Podling Project Management Committee. And these are the people who set direction of the project and who work with the rest of the project to work out what features to work on. And generally, most of them will form part of the project management committee when the project graduates. So the next part will probably take about 6 months or maybe a year, and that is learning the Apache way. And I went through the values of the Apache way before, but it's more about applying those values and understanding how they can be applied to your particular project. So, and it's going to vary from project to project what that means. So, I can't give advice that works for all projects, but I can give some generic advice that will help. And that is that you need to focus on people and the community, not just code. All right? A project is great if it can commit lots of code and make a release every month, but if that is all it does, it won't graduate. There are other requirements to graduation, and that includes having a sustainable community. So just committing code and doing nothing else doesn't form a sustainable community. Everything has to be in the open, and a little more than that, it has to be in a place that is public and archivable and searchable, and this really means that all important decisions need to happen on an Apache mailing list. And I know mailing lists are sometimes seen as old-fashioned, and maybe not everyone uses them as much as they have in the past. But there are very important reasons for using mailing lists in that they are controlled by the ASF infrastructure, so we will have that information forever. Other temporary platforms like chat platforms, for example, come and go every 4 or 5 years, and maybe all that information will be lost. You need to recognise that when people are contributing to your project, that after they've contributed for a while, that they're recognised and be made committers of the project. Your project is not going to graduate if you don't add any committers or PPMC members. It is best if what that committer bar is documented somewhere. So you should set expectations for how much work someone needs to do to become a committer on your project. because this is like, if you set a really high committer bar and say like someone has to work 6 months on the project before they'll be made a committer, if someone doesn't have that time available or doesn't know that that is a requirement, they may get frustrated when they see that they're not being voted in as a committer. So it's best to document those expectations so that, you know, people will work well together. You also need to stay vendor neutral. The ASF is a place where vendors can come together and collaborate and produce software, but people at the ASF must represent themselves, not who they work for. And you're not going to graduate as a project if there's only a single vendor involved. It's very unlikely. Like the bar for graduation is much harder if there's only one vendor involved, because you have to show that everyone is acting independently and that the vendor doesn't have undue control of the project. So and you know, you also have to make this happen and to grow the community and not be vendor neutral, you've got to be inclusive and welcoming. So, you know, if people show up on your mailing list, or, you know, someone comes along and it's their first PR, you know, be friendly to them. Say hi. Say, oh yeah, you've made a little mistake here. Let me help you out with that. You know, if you be welcoming to people, they're likely to contribute more, and eventually, you know, maybe that person will turn into a committer or a PMC member. One of the other important things about going through the incubator is learning licensing and IP. The ASF takes licensing very, very seriously, and we do this so that people who use us know that there's no legal risks, or minimal legal risks in using any ASF software. And we have a good reputation for that, and that's what we want to keep. So when you contribute code to an Apache project, you need to know where that code comes from. You need to follow the licensing policy. You need to document any third-party code that is inside your releases. You must make sure that all of the licenses of that code are compatible with the Apache license, and don't add any extra restrictions on top of that. You must also ensure that everyone who contributes to your project is allowed to give you that code. They may need permission from their employer, for example. So that's what we have ICLAs for. That's individual contributor license agreements. So once someone has signed one of those, and that generally happens when they become a committer, it means that they're telling you that they have permission to contribute to their project and contribute that code under the Apache license, and that the IP doesn't belong to someone else. Well, sorry, I should say that one thing about the ICLA is that it doesn't actually transfer IP. You still have all the rights to it, but it gives the ASF a worldwide perpetual license to use that code as they see fit. So, and yeah, and you need to follow, you know, the Apache license, obviously, because it's an ASF project. So, you know, this is getting some time into the project now. You're starting to build a community around that. So you need to be, you know, continue to do some of the things that I've already said. You need to continue to be open and transparent. You need to continue to work together on decisions. Make decisions via consensus. You know, you have to come to agreement about how you're going to move forward in an open and transparent way. Yeah, you need to add new contributors and help them out, as I was just saying before. How are we going for time?
About 5 minutes left.
Good, thank you. So you need to make releases, and when making a release, the ASF has a particular way of doing it, and there are good reasons for that. The main reason why we have releases and vote on releases, which seems a bit slow maybe to some people, like generally if you come from an open source project which is just on GitHub and not part of a foundation, if you make a release, you just publish a release. There's no voting. There's no waiting 72 hours. There's, you know, none of that. But by doing this process, it gives you legal protection. And it means that if someone comes along and says, hey, wait a minute, there's a problem with this release, you've included our code in it and you don't have rights to that code, the ASF will stand up for you. So there are very good reasons for why this happens. But in general, what happens is that you vote on the release as a community. Because you're not a top-level project yet, it's the Incubator PMC votes that are binding on your release, so there's a two-stage release process. You need to sign releases for verification. You need to include a disclaimer saying that it's an incubating project. You need to include the license and notice files. You need to put ASF headers on all the files. And at the ASF, a release is source code. So you need to make a purely source code release. It can't have any binaries in it. It can't have any, it can't have any compiled code inside it. So you can also make a convenience binary release for users who may not be able to compile your source. But in general, a release at the ASF is only source code. So once you've got through that, you have added committers and PMC members, you have made releases, you understand branding, you have multiple people from different companies contributing to the project. At that point, you're basically ready for release, ready for graduation. And the main thing that we look for is, can you self-govern? Can you act as a project on your own without the incubator helping you anymore? So that's the main criteria. It's like you may have only added a couple of committers, you may have only made a couple of releases, but that's it. So then you get approval from the Incubator PMC. There will be a discussion and vote on it. And then if the Incubator PMC thinks you're ready, it then goes to a board resolution and the board votes on it and you'll become a top-level project. The board very, very rarely turns down a project. There's only been a couple of instances in the last 5 years that I can think of. And that's it.